I bought a house in a perfect neighborhood where everyone smiled, the lawns never died, and silence wasn't peace. It was a rule. The HOA said they were keeping us safe. But when I found my own name carved into the town's monument, I realized I wasn't new here. I was their creator. When Elias Carter moved to Crestfall Hills, he thought he'd found his version of paradise. Perfect lawns, neighbors who waved from driveways, children who didn't shout, dogs who didn't bark, sprinklers that hissed at the exact same hour every morning. Everything looked clean, calm, organized. The air even smelled rehearsed, like peace had a scent. The HOA packet arrived before his boxes did. 87 pages of rules printed on thick cream paper. The header read, "For the preservation of harmony." It was so specific that it felt almost ritualistic, the type of mailbox allowed, the exact distance a flagpole could stand from a door, and one odd rule buried near the end. No unauthorized symbols may be displayed publicly. He didn't think much of it then. The first HOA meeting was more like a sermon than a community gathering. The president, Mrs. Vale, spoke with a smile that could slice glass. "We take pride in our harmony," she said, her voice gentle but heavy with authority. "We don't raise our voices. We don't argue. We maintain perfection, together." People nodded, clapped softly, and whispered amen under their breath. Elias laughed quietly to himself, but no one joined him. A week later, he hung a small black flag on his porch. It wasn't political or loud, just a square of fabric stitched with a silver circle and a single mark inside, a design from his late father's old workshop. He didn't know what it meant. He just remembered his father saying, "This symbol keeps the noise away." By morning, there was a notice pinned to his door. "Remove the banner immediately. It disrupts the neighborhood's unity." He thought it was absurd, so he didn't. The next day, another notice arrived, then a fine, then silence. The neighbors who used to wave stopped. Curtains shifted when he walked by. The mailman skipped his house. Even the air around his home felt heavier. He tried to ignore it until the lights flickered one night and the power went out. His phone had no signal. From the window, he saw figures standing across the street, still silhouettes under the streetlight. Each one wore a small pin that gleamed faintly in the dark, a silver circle with an eye carved into it. When he opened the door to confront them, they were gone. Only a faint scent of smoke lingered in the air, like burnt paper and pine. The next morning, he went to the HOA office, a low, pristine building near the lake. The receptionist smiled too perfectly and handed him a form. "If you want your power restored, you'll need to apologize in writing," she said, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. Elias chuckled. "You're kidding, right?" Her smile didn't waver. "We're a community of peace. Resistance creates noise." He left without signing anything. That night, a letter slid under his door. The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar. "You don't remember what you built, but the town does. Stop before it remembers you too." Elias froze. He didn't know anyone in Crestfall Hills. He'd moved here 3 weeks ago. The only person who could have known about his past, his father, had been dead for 15 years. He sat at his kitchen table staring at the symbol on the flag. That silver circle, that strange mark inside. And for the first time, he noticed something he hadn't before. The HOA's logo on every letterhead, every street sign, every meeting banner, was the same symbol, his father's symbol. That night the wind didn't move. The trees were still. The air pressed against the windows like a held breath. And Elias Carter, sitting in the center of his quiet living room, began to realize that Crestfall Hills wasn't a neighborhood. It was a pattern, one he'd somehow been drawn back into. The next day he drove around the town looking for clues, something, anything that explained the symbol's meaning. He found a small park with a monument at its center, a marble pedestal engraved with the words, "Founders of Crestfall Hills, 1985. Below it were 6 names. One of them was Elias Carter. He stumbled back. The letters weren't faded or vandalized. They were newly restored, polished, almost reverent. It didn't make sense. That would have made him a founder 40 years ago. But he was only 34. He ran his fingers over the engraving, and for a moment he swore he felt warmth, like the stone pulsed under his skin. Then a voice spoke behind him. "You shouldn't touch that." He turned to see Mrs. Vale standing by the path, hands folded, her expression calm as always. "This town has a long memory, Mr. Carter," she said softly. "Longer than you think." He wanted to demand answers, but something in her tone froze him. She looked at him like a teacher watching a student repeat a mistake. Then she turned and walked away. Her voice carried faintly on the still air. "Some of us never really leave, Elias. We just forget." He stood there long after she disappeared, the word forget echoing in his mind. The wind began to stir faintly, just a single breath, as if the town itself had sighed. And in that moment, Elias realized something terrifying. Maybe Crestfall Hills hadn't found him by accident. Maybe it had called him home. For the next few days, Elias tried to convince himself it was all a misunderstanding, an eerie coincidence. But every time he left his house, the town reminded him otherwise. The sprinklers turned off when he walked by. Porch lights dimmed. Conversations ended mid-sentence as if someone had pressed mute on the world. The only sound that ever broke the stillness was the faint, steady hum coming from the lake. He began keeping a journal, notes about odd details, like how the clouds above Crestfall Hills never seemed to move, or how the HOA cameras blinked even when the power was out. He noticed that no one ever seemed to age. The kids who rode their bikes looked the same every morning, the same haircut, the same shoes, the same laughter, always at the same corner. On the fourth night, he heard movement in his backyard. When he looked out the window, there were 4 figures standing by the flagpole. They wore gray suits, faces hidden under silver masks, shaped like the HOA crest, a circle with an eye. One of them held a clipboard. Another had what looked like a candle that didn't flicker. Elias grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside. "What are you doing?" he shouted. The figures didn't respond. They simply turned toward him, heads tilting in perfect unison like marionettes on invisible strings. Then the one with the clipboard spoke. "Violation 38C, unauthorized symbol display. Step back, Mr. Carter. You know the rules." Elias took a step forward anyway. "Who are you people?" The man paused, lowering his clipboard slightly. Behind the mask, a faint sigh. "You really don't remember, do you?" And then without another word, they walked away, disappearing into the still night like smoke dissolving in air. He barely slept. The next morning, a new fine appeared in his mailbox. The amount didn't matter. The message did. "You belong to us." Elias decided to dig deeper. He drove to the county office, hoping to find old records about Crestfall Hills. But when he asked for files predating 1990, the clerk frowned. "Crestfall Hills wasn't incorporated until '92, she said. "Before that, there's no record of anything here, just empty land." That was impossible. The monument said 1985. He asked for old property maps, and the clerk leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, off the record. There's something strange about that place. The developers never filed blueprints, no ownership transfers, nothing. It's like it just appeared one year, fully built." Elias thanked her and left. He didn't drive home right away. Instead, he pulled over by the edge of the highway and stared at the boundary sign that marked the entrance to Crestfall Hills. The sign was spotless, freshly painted, gleaming under the sun. It read, "Welcome home, where peace lives." Below it, etched faintly into the metal, he saw words barely visible beneath the reflection of light. "Built upon silence, renewed in blood." The letters shimmered faintly, then faded like mist. By the time Elias reached his driveway, his neighbor, Mr. Hanley, was waiting by the fence. A kind-faced man in his 50s, always polite, always smiling. Except now. His expression was tight, nervous. "You need to leave, Elias," he whispered. "They're not going to let you remember quietly." Elias frowned. "Who's they?" Hanley's eyes darted toward the HOA office in the distance. The board, the original 6. They built this place to contain something, not to run it. You opened the seal when you hung that flag. It wasn't a symbol. It was a mark, a signature. Elias shook his head. A signature for what? Hanley didn't answer. He just stepped back, his voice trembling. You'll understand tonight. They're holding the silence meeting. You'll be invited. That evening, a letter arrived embossed with the HOA crest. The ink shimmered faintly when he tilted the page. It read, Mr. Carter, your attendance at the quarterly meeting is mandatory. Location, the Lake Pavilion, 9 p.m. Agenda, restoration of harmony. He almost didn't go, but something inside him, deeper than logic, urged him to. When he reached the pavilion, it was already filled. Every resident sat perfectly still, facing a single podium at the center. Mrs. Vale stood behind it, wearing a long white coat that caught the moonlight. Behind her, a mural of the same symbol, the circle and the eye, glowed faintly on the wall. Tonight, she began softly, we address disturbance. Her eyes found Elias. Our community thrives on stillness, but one of us has awakened noise, the kind of noise that calls the past to the present. People turned their heads toward him, but not in anger. In fear, Mrs. Vale stepped down from the podium, her heels silent on the wooden floor. Elias Carter, she said, you were one of our founders. You gave us this order. You wrote the covenant of silence, and now you've broken it. Elias felt his pulse quicken. That's not possible. I wasn't even born when this place was founded. She tilted her head. You don't remember. You wouldn't. But your mind was renewed, your body rewritten. The HOA isn't a council, Elias. It's a system, a cycle. And you were the first. He stumbled back. What are you saying? She gestured toward the mural behind her, and the lights dimmed. The wall pulsed faintly, revealing a shape beneath the paint. A shadow of a face. His face. Mrs. Vale whispered, you built this neighborhood to preserve control, to trap the echoes of chaos that once tore this land apart. But peace demanded memory to be erased, and yours was the first offering. The audience sat perfectly silent, their expressions blank, as if they'd all heard this before, countless times. Mrs. Vale approached him and gently touched his arm. You wanted order, Elias. You wanted quiet. You gave yourself to it willingly. But the moment you hung that flag, you called yourself back. The flag, the symbol, his father's mark. It wasn't protection. It was a summoning. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He tore through his father's old belongings, searching for proof, for a lie, for anything that made sense. Inside an old journal, buried beneath blueprints and notes, he found a single page with a familiar phrase written in faded ink. To maintain peace, one must forget the sound of truth. And below it, a signature. Elias M. Carter, founder, Crestfall Project 1985. He stared at the name, feeling the floor tilt beneath him. His breath caught in his throat. He wasn't just living in Crestfall Hills. He was Crestfall Hills. And the town had finally remembered him. By morning, Elias could no longer tell if what he remembered was real or a nightmare crawling through his thoughts. His reflection looked older, lines carved deeper, eyes hollow with something like recognition. Crestfall Hills was no longer pretending to be normal. The sky stayed dim, though it was noon. The air smelled faintly of static, like before a thunderstorm that never arrived. And beneath it all, that same hum from the lake, louder now, pulsing like a heartbeat. He returned to the lake at dusk, driven by a memory he didn't want but couldn't ignore. The path was empty, the houses watching him from behind drawn curtains. When he reached the pavilion, the water glowed faintly blue beneath the surface. Shapes moved within, not fish but reflections of people. Dozens of them standing motionless underwater, their faces pale and their eyes open. He realized what he was seeing. The old residents. The ones who had moved away. They hadn't gone anywhere. They were part of the town, Mrs. Vale appeared behind him, her voice soft as the hum itself. "They keep us steady," she said. "Every time one of us breaks the rules, the lake remembers. It absorbs the chaos." She stepped closer, the reflection of the water flickering across her face like firelight. "You created it to contain yourself, Elias. But the lake can't hold what you've become again." He turned toward her, heart pounding. "You said I built this place to preserve peace. But all I see is fear. Control. Puppets living the same day forever. Peace is control," she said calmly. "Without it, the world collapses. You knew that once." Elias shook his head, gripping the edge of the pavilion. "I didn't build this to silence people. I built it to silence myself." The words slipped out before he even understood them. And then, like floodgates opening, memories began to return. Not visions, but sensations. The sound of screaming, fire, a city in ruin, and his voice, chanting the covenant that would erase everything, order through silence, balance through forgetting. He remembered now. He hadn't been a victim. He had been the architect, the founder of a project designed to erase chaos by rewriting human memory, a utopia built on voluntary amnesia. The HOA wasn't a council. It was an algorithm encoded in every resident. Each rule was a command to suppress awareness. And when the system began to break, he was meant to be reborn inside it, to repair it from within. Mrs. Vale smiled faintly, almost sad. "You always come back here, you always remember, and every time you try to destroy what you built." Elias stepped closer to the water, staring at his reflection. It shimmered, and then shifted. The face staring back wasn't his. It was younger, sharper, wearing the same calm authority as Mrs. Vale. He realized with dread that it wasn't just his memory returning. The system was reactivating him. The HOA was trying to make him its leader again. "I won't start it over," he whispered. "You don't have a choice," she replied. "You are the code." The hum grew louder, the lake's light intensifying until the air itself vibrated. The residents began to appear along the banks, hundreds of them, silent and still, their eyes glowing faintly with the reflection of the water. They were waiting for his command, waiting for their founder to restore peace. But Elias had seen what peace really meant: stillness without freedom, order without life. He turned toward the crowd, raising his voice above the roar of the lake. "You don't have to obey," he shouted. "You don't have to forget." For the first time, some of the residents blinked. A few gasped softly as if waking from sleep. The light in their eyes flickered. Mrs. Vale stepped back, fear flashing across her face. "Stop, Elias. You'll unbind everything." "Maybe it's time we remembered," he said, and then he stepped into the water. The lake erupted in light, blinding, pure, and silent. It wasn't pain he felt, but release. The hum turned into a roar, then into silence so deep it seemed to erase the air itself. The water swallowed him whole, his reflection splintering into thousands of fragments, faces, voices, memories, before dissolving into nothing. When the light faded, Crestfall Hills was quiet again. The sign at the gate had changed. The words, "Where peace lives," were gone. In their place, freshly carved, were 4 new ones. "Here lies the founder's silence." Days later, a new family moved into House 9, the Carter residence. The HOA welcomed them with cheerful smiles and a welcome packet filled with perfectly typed rules. The lake was calm again, the hum gone. And in the reflection of the water, for just a second, a man's shadow lingered, watching, waiting, until it disappeared into stillness once more.